I'll show you people who are going through the garbage, collecting things, sorting them, and the next day they're selling it up on the street. They're making themselves enough money that they don't have to stay on the street. They're staying in some of the transient hotels, even pulling together resources to do it. That gets them at least a place to stay. I know people out there, and I met a man, not just one, but many, who was a person who came from a Wall Street background, who found himself one day homeless. And why? Because he waited too late to change. He was still hoping something would change. He'd get rehired back after he'd used all of his money and couldn't pay his mortgage and couldn't borrow any more from friends and family. One day, the door was locked, and they took everything. And he literally said, the terror of his life, everything he feared, everything he worked so hard to keep from happening, being insecure and destitute, he was destitute. And he spent 3 days on the street in a depressed state. He wouldn't go to a shelter, he wouldn't go to any of the other places to get food. And then one day he said, what the heck am I doing? I got a mind. And so he started going through and recycling things. He started getting giant bags, and he did 10 times the recycling of anybody else. And he made himself $60 a day. Well, with that $60 a day, 7 days a week, 60 times 70, $420. $420 is more than what most people make right now in America take home. And then in a period of 2 months, he had himself a small apartment again. And then he started doing work in a home-based business, and he started re-educating himself. He started going to night school. And now he has a whole new career, and ironically, the career he has now is the career he always wanted, but the one he had feared doing. And now he's not afraid, because when the bottom fell out, he still survived. He was still a person. But now he's a stronger person because he hit bottom and realized that a lot of what he was living for was he was living by his fears, not his strength. He had never really used his strength. He had used his shrewdness, his aggressiveness, his insecurity to motivate him forward, but he had no life. Now he has a life. So we have to ask ourselves, at what point are we willing to honor the real self? I look at it like this. If I lost everything today, if I had no radio show, if I had no apartment, if I had nothing, if I had just what I had on my body and was put on the street, I'd survive. And not for 1 second would I feel bad about myself as a human being. Not for 1 second. I'd have friends in a moment out in that street. I'd make friends. And I'd start to enjoy myself and use the resources, because human beings sharing positive energy with one another, you already have a resource, you know? And I would, hey, if I'm going to be poor, I'd rather be poor where it's warm than where it's cold. I'd go where it's warm. And where it's warm, I'd go clear where it's warm. I'd go to the tropics. Food's cheap. And what do you know? 90% of the population there has less income than people on welfare here. So I could eat healthy foods, I could be in the sun, and I could be around nice people. But that's the way they live. So we have to look at what we're capable of doing. Instead, we look at our fear of what would happen to us and how we would feel if we lost everything. Well, if you're motivated by your fear of the consequences of loss and the uncertainty of taking a chance, you'll never take a chance, because you're going to fear the consequences of taking a chance. If anything, we should start with nothing. There's a movie that no one's ever seen before. I'd never seen it. I'd never seen it released anywhere. It was by Cary Grant. It was an early film. And I just saw it a couple weeks ago. I rented it. And it was about, he was a very wealthy man who went to see a doctor about something, and he was very impatient seeing the doctor, and there were a lot of poor people there, and the doctor really read him the riot act. And the doctor says, you know, you have some nerve. You think because you're a wealthy person that you should have a right to go past these people who are poor and sitting here patiently? And he said, I won't accept your money, because your money here is not worth anything. But then again, you have made yourself worth nothing. And he said, I would like to see people like you live like these people and see if you could survive. And then he took the bet. He said, sure, I could survive. And he said, well, you have to survive with no money. All you can do is have $5. Now, this was a film shot down during the Depression. So he took the bet, and he went out with just the clothes on his back and $5, and he started finding out how hard it was to survive. And like the other people during the Depression. But then he started using his brain. He started being creative, and he started to succeed at it. And then he became very empathetic towards those people who have a very happy life, even though they don't have what we would call a prosperous life. But he found value in other resources other than just the material. And then when the year was up and he came back to the doctor, he saw that many of the values that he and his so-called successful friends had been sharing weren't values he any longer would want to participate in, that there were other values that were richer. So when I travel around the world and I see people who have nothing materially, nothing, but they have so much goodness, so much joy, so much love of life, I think, my God, how spoiled and petulant have we become? We're babies, you know, we're pathetic, really pathetic. I can't feel sorry for anybody in this culture, not when I've seen other cultures that have nothing. The poorest of the poor in America will be considered as rich as kings in some countries. You know, so how can I emote sympathy? What I can do is encourage people to be more of a symbol of strength within themselves, to appreciate whatever assets they have. And what's nice is when you have nothing, then everything you get is something you appreciate. When you have everything, you appreciate none of it. It's all taken for granted. It's a token, it's a toy, it's a trophy, it's a conquest. So I think we have to go back to having an austere spirit and not afraid to take chances. And by the way, when I lecture in 2 months to probably 4,000 or 5,000 people out in Santa Fe, I'm willing to bet that 75% of the audience there are going to be people who went there with nothing, right? Who wanted a new life and were willing to take a chance and see that it worked, and who networked and used their assets, their warmth, their love, their spirituality, their creativity, their flexibility, their intuition, to have other people accept them and work with them. You think anyone's going to work with you if you've got a negative attitude or cynical or bitter or whiner or complainer? I don't want a whiner in my life. Do you want a whiner in your life? Yeah, Joe. Who wants someone like that around? Who wants a negative person? Who trusts a negative person? Negative people don't trust themselves. Why should anyone else trust them? Nothing's going to come if you're negative. Nothing. That you can be sure. If you're hesitant, nothing's going to happen. So we got to take some chances. We got to take some risks. Otherwise, life will be as self-fulfilling as we imagine. Now, create both short and long-term goals. Get yourself from here to at least here to get started. Give yourself 1 week to create a plan for your life. And every day, take time during the day and at night to create your life plan. That's your short-term goal. So at least you have a plan. Look, you've had all this input, and not just from here. I'm sure you've had it from many other resources. Well, what are you going to do with it? All this is meaningless if you don't actualize it. How will your goals help you to be more balanced and whole? Because your goals give you a sense of direction. They give you a sense of purpose. And then you make your life a process to get there. Willing to acknowledge that there are going to be errors, so what? Mistakes, so what? You're going to get off track. All right, get back on. To what do you feel naturally connected? Because it's what you feel naturally connected to that you're going to sustain your interest in. Don't do anything that doesn't feel natural. Honor the natural self. Honor the natural energy inside. There's something inside of you and you and you and you that is natural. You felt it all along. Now honor it. Go after it. I don't care how impossible it seems. Look, anything can happen if you make it. Nothing's going to happen if you don't try. Prepare a response to mistakes and errors and actions and judgments, loss and rejection. Prepare in advance for that. If I know when I go into a meeting what I anticipate to be all the objections that are going to hit me, and I answer them in advance, then in the absence of all the no's, there's got to be a yes somewhere along the way. If I'm flexible with my publisher, and if my publisher says, and this just happened, because I gave him a book that wasn't a part of my contractual obligation, and I said, this is a book I'd like to be my next book. Well, Gary, this isn't And I'd already anticipated all the negatives. And I gave them an answer. And finally, after about a half hour of answering all their objections, they said, well, you know, you've answered all of my concerns. I said, then it's a yes. And they said, okay. Now, had I not done that, had I not prepared for how people would respond to it, then it would have been a no. And then I said, oh, okay. Well, don't say, oh, okay. Be affirmative. It's going to be yes. I'm determined within 4 months to make every American aware that alternative therapy is, along with traditional therapy, the best of both is what we should have. I am determined to see that happen, and I will see it happen. Now, in between now and whenever I decide to do this thing, I have to figure out all the reasons why it can be rejected. And I've got to build into my program an answer to every rejection. If I don't, then there'll be rejections. If I do, there's going to be very little room for rejection. At least from people who want to change and need some enthusiasm. How much of our self, how much of our real self do we share? Let's face it, a lot of our relationships could be a lot more exciting if we let the real self out. I mean, let what's really in here out. Forget about your image. Forget about, you know, what you've manicured. Forget about what you've let people believe is the real you. Let the real you come out. Let them see what you're really about. Either they'll like it or not. But you should let it out. To what are we attached, and does this limit our freedom? Are we pressured to love, work, or anything else? If we're pressured to accept things that we naturally wouldn't and intuitively wouldn't, then make a note of that so you can start to disengage from that. Constructive disengagement, I call. Constructively let go of the things that are not a part of the natural self. And look at what you become artificially responsible for, so you can constructively disengage from that as well. To be open, to be open to a togetherness with life, we must first enjoy the feeling of freedom to be who we are. When, where, and how often do you experience any togetherness? Togetherness is that natural bond, that natural connection. What you're doing in that moment is right for you. Michael, are you doing exactly what you want to be doing with your life? Do you know what you want to be doing with your life?
Somewhat.
All right. Well, I'm willing to bet that inside of you there is a voice that has told you a million times, tried to draw you through feelings, through intuitive interpretations, through fantasies, to the real self. But in between accepting that has been all these other challenges to the self that has been constructed, the family man, the responsible member of society, the person who's honored the legal profession by being the nice lawyer, son, the successful, and all this. And so you're having to weigh what you've gained with what you don't even know would exist in saying, do I have to give up any of this to have this? Well, sometimes it's a matter of integrating the two if they are both naturally fitting. Otherwise, it's a matter of re-educating yourself, taking the real focus and time to determine what is important to your life, what is meaningful in your life from this day on, from today on, so you can have a constructive disengagement from this, so you can follow this when you have prepared yourself. And preparing for your journey allows that natural transition to occur. My God, could you imagine how many people in Detroit, how many people at IBM and every place else are just sitting waiting for their pink slip, doing nothing? Nothing. Well, what the hell do they think is going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. In the absence of action, there is inaction. And I'll tell you, unemployment, depression, overweight, disease, fighting, child abuse, wife battering, that's what's going to happen. And we're supposed to be surprised at this? Action now. Create a new beginning. If you feel helpless, then you are helpless. If you don't, then you're not. And I don't believe that we should just jump from one thing to another. I'm not suggesting for a second some radical detachment. This is not a guillotining process of cutting something off. It's a matter of preparing a program where over a period of time, you give yourself a legitimate period of time, you can re-engage yourself in what is real and new and essential, and what you can constructively disengage from that which is not. So as you concomitantly extend one energy forward, you're able to retract the energy back concomitantly. Until at some point, a year or 2 years or 3 years, you're fully into your own new life and the old life is gone. That's how this process should be. At least then it has a chance of succeeding. You will have incorporated the skills, the networking, the support systems, the right new friends, getting the right encouragement from family, from self, honoring the whole self so that it'll be an easier transition. Endless striving is not natural or healthy. People who just strive, that's just pushing yourself. Pushing and pushing and pushing is not going to achieve anything. We've all seen people who've been so good at striving, they've achieved something, not even to appreciate what they've achieved. So do what is natural and healthy, at a pace that's natural and healthy. Ask yourself, where is your passion and where is your excitement? Because it's where your passion and excitement are, is where your heart should follow. That's where your life should be. If your passion is in helping people and your career now doesn't offer that, then choose the skills and take the time for the studying and apprenticing at life until you get what is necessary so you can make a natural transition into helping people, whatever that might be. Find the beauty in yourself and others and in life each day. After all, it's in what you find and what you choose to see that makes beauty exist. If you choose not to see beauty, it won't exist. And then what you see in the absence of beauty is ugliness. And that's why people can justify their cynicism, because all they see is ugliness. Well, that's all they're choosing to see. They're not allowing anything else in. And lastly, acceptance must mean we have arrived at our destination. How would we be if we never arrived but continued our journey with brief stays? You see, most people think that when they've gotten to a destination, they've been accepted. That's why they stop growing. I've got my doctorate, I'm smart. I've got my master's, I'm smart. I've got my degree, I've got my job, I got my bonus, I got my retirement, I got my pension, I got my love life, I got this, I got that. People think that somehow that's the destination. And then they stagnate and they start forming a protective barrier around this to hold themselves in and hold the world out. It becomes a fortress. And what you see all over the world, all over your neighborhoods, you see people are living in mini fortresses or maximum fortresses, but it's still a fortress. It's self-protective. It's like taking the free-flowing water that rejuvenates and takes us through life and taking it out and putting it into a pool. Well, for maybe a day, 2 days, the pool is still clear. Then it becomes more and more cloudy. Then it becomes a cesspool, and then it dies. It eutrophies. Well, our life eutrophies when we get out of the flow of life. People who are passively excited by everything as a spectator are people who have disengaged from the activity of life. They're participating through some prurient view, some sublimating view. People who are enjoying life are participating in it, in their communities, in their churches, their synagogues, and service to society. That's a participation. They're not sitting home watching television, vegetating. They're engaging in things that they find joy and strength and comfort in. And that's a part of it, getting engaged in that which affirms the higher values within ourselves. And look as if you never arrive. As long as you don't take too seriously everything you do, then you don't have to feel that what you've done is the best you can do. You think, okay, well, that was all right. I can do it better. And then you strive a little more. And you strive a little more. So your whole life is a striving, but it's natural. It's not forced. It's not artificial. You're not doing it out of anxiety or fear to prove something. You're not doing it out of ego, gratification, or need. You're not doing it to identify yourself to the world that you're all right. You're doing it as a natural process of growth. It's like watching a horse run in a pasture. The horse doesn't have a saddle and is not winning a trophy. It's running for the joy of running. It's natural to run. We forget to do what is natural. We forget to honor the natural energies of the natural self. And this is a way, yes?
When you say the thing about people living in small fortresses, would that be something like an extension of the ego?
The ego is always, good point, the ego is always trying to take what is natural and to neutralize the naturalness and make it an artificial projection. The ego is what we use to project that which is a lie. The ego is almost always projecting deceit and a lie. It is a way of manipulating the public to accept us out here for what we're doing. Look how I dress, look how I look how I act. That's the ego. Accept all this instead of saying, in here I feel great, come on in and enjoy the real me. No matter what I look like, I'm still okay. Could you imagine our society where we have devalued what is really important, and that is the human qualities for the superficial qualities of just physical beauty and youth? We're a culture that is so enamored by the ego that anyone who doesn't project one is considered uninteresting. Isn't that a phenomena? When in point of fact, the egotists are the most uninteresting people. What is most natural and most accepted is always what is most easy to accept and easy to share. After all, a person who's projecting ego is never asking you to share the ego qualities unconditionally. It is always highly conditional and very manipulative. When a person is asking you to share the natural beauty within their heart and self and spirit, it's always natural. It's effortless. That's what we ultimately bond with. And that's it for tonight. Thank you all.